All right, here I am again. Let's see who jumps on today. Now I feel really weird about playing music. Some people were complaining about it. I play music when I'm not doing anything else. So here's my music that I'm playing.
Come on, come on, come on, come on.
Write it down for you.
Come on. Check it out, 1, 2. Steady undercover, duck, don't move. This is Stick Up Jack for the melody, beats and groove. Attend steady school, packing fine tools. The most unusual crew with the most eloquent, orchestrating the moves. Danger, my man's flow is spherical. Similar, my tongue is lyric. Arsenal, bold headlines, reading the article. Murder Ramon, let it be known. Spitting two-tongue Bolivian street orator to the core from the street corridor. My stopping ground renowned, but show the shot town with a crown and the pitchfork pound. But with the sound in the background, most start with high tops, out with shice crops. You could catch a quick red like a stop. Or go for greed in the valley of the rope. With caution, most yellow bellies get wrapped up in the choke. Scrapping for the diamond, but get smacked with the cold. Majority, I believe this the place to be, but I can't guarantee that sweet chivalry. It's the good, bad, and ugly, based on what I see. This place makes a backbone and weather's reality. January sights, July is hot tea, and the almighty is my hope when I grieve. My people getting cooked in the beef, so we echo the words to get free. Plus, bring the meat to the matter, no matter how the grease and scatter. My papa cooked the purest better. So take a taste of the heaven sent with that street medicine. Best be hesitant, cause it's line from the urban tenement. Got fangs covered in relevant sentiment. Suave. Yeah, freedom, that's what my people say. Yeah, freedom, that's what my people want. Come, freedom, that's what my people
CW.
say. Check it out, yeah, freedom, that's what my people say. Yeah, freedom, that's
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna happen, CW. Sorry. I wouldn't mind it. But
check it out, from the strut and the step to getting bucked for the rap. It's all a cry for when awakening to those that have slept. Don't let the outer core cause you to let judgment pass through. Help emancipate, plan to fate. Someone has to. I ask you to join this regiment in the trenches.
no, son, this is actually Bird Ramon, the band before St. Bagu. And yes, this is Sam on violin.
Stop our mission and those that have stopped to listen have grown when they caught the vision. Listen to your city speak, tune your ears with precision, then answer the call with constructive criticism. Lift and remove the blame as we soothe the pain. Keep in mind sometimes we gotta lose to gain. Aim for the promised land like the sand on the seashore. Then look ahead so you can see what to reach for. We need more troops that'll shoot for the truth and loosen the news to produce the new rooted roots of the youth rule. And coinciding with the spirit, your freedom is here.
Oh, so that was Sublime.
Yeah, freedom, that's what my people say. Yeah, freedom, that's what my people want. Yeah, freedom, that's what my people say. Check it out, 1, 2. Come on, yeah, freedom, that's what my people say. Yeah, freedom, that's what my people want. Freedom, that's what my people say. Yeah. Sky and landscape drapes adjacent to our retinas, letting us experience samples of what's been set
How's
for
the
us.
snow where you're at so far?
The rush before it dissipates. We manifest that
We still don't have any here.
Generate the pace, cause we hustle over breaks. Hip hop was live bait, so we ate until our freight was full. In the belly of the beast, yo, the fatty wall is deep, but we dagger to the meat, slicing through the cycle of the street. Sweeping through metros, outskirts, and pueblos. Let's grow through thresholds, mold and let go of everything that brings weight down on our spine. Our backbone's the foundation that's supporting the mind. Up in some desperate times, a Vietnam time bomb, similar to the state we on. We scrap for crumbs with function.
No more than 4 inches. 4 inches sounds like a lot.
Freedom in the midst of the middle of the evening. Freedom, that's what my people say. Yeah, freedom, that's what my people want. Check it, freedom, that's what my people say. Check it out, 1, 2. Come on, yeah, come on. Freedom, that's what my people say. Yeah, freedom, that's what my people want. Yeah, freedom, that's what my people say.
26 inches? Why do you live in a place that can get 26 inches of snow? I have a house for sale in a place that doesn't get 26 inches of snow. Just saying.
Check it out, 1, 2. Steady undercover, Doc Duck, don't move. This is Stick Up Jack for the melody, beats and groove. Attend steady school, pack and fire.
Oh yeah, Chicago has no art or culture or opportunity.
My man's flow is spherical, similar, my tongue is lyric. Arsenal, bold headlines, read in the article. Murder Ramon, let it be known. Spitting two-tongue Bolivian street orator to the core from the street corridor. My stopping ground renowned, big shoulder shot town with a crown in the pitchfork pound. What was the sound in the background? Most
It is windy.
You could catch a quick red like a stop. Or go for greed in the valley.
Actually, I was commenting on that yesterday with my wife. We were downtown. We parked like block away from the theater. And yeah, it was very windy and it was quite an uncomfortable walk.
This place makes a backbone that weather's reality. January sights, July is hot tea, and the Almighty is my hope when I grieve. My people getting cooked in the beef, so we echo the words to get free. Plus, bringing me to the matter, no matter how the grease to scatter. My papa cooked the purest better. So take a taste of the heaven sent with that street medicine. Best be hesitant, cause it's line from the urban tenement. Got fangs covered in relevant sentiment. Suave. Yeah, freedom, that's what my people say. Yeah, freedom, that's what my people want.
Because we have somebody else viewing now.
That's what my people say. Check it out, yeah, freedom, that's what my people
If you're
say.
watching, let me know if you think the music is annoying.
Check it, freedom, that's what my people say. Yeah, come on, check it out.
From the strut and the step to getting buck for the rep. It's all a crop for when awakening to those that have slept. Don't let the outer core cause you to let judgment pass through. Help emancipate and plan to fate. Someone has to, I ask you, to join this regiment in the trenches and bring an optimistic aroma to all of the senses. Defenseless are the opponents. Take freedom and own it. Think comprise the components to change our lives as we know it. From poets to politicians, there's no one to stop our mission. And those that have stopped and listened have grown when they caught the vision. Listen to your city speak, tune your ears with precision. Then answer the call with constructive criticism. Lift and remove the blame as we soothe the pain. Keep in mind, sometimes we gotta lose to gain. Aim for the promised land like the sand on the seashore. Then look ahead so you can see what to reach for. We need more troops that'll shoot
I will
for the
keep
truth.
music playing until somebody complains about it.
And coinciding with the spirit, your freedom is here, cause when it talks, I can hear it. Yeah,
freedom, that's what my people say. Yeah, freedom, that's what my people want. Yeah, freedom, that's what my people say. Check it out, 1, 2. Come on, yeah, freedom, that's what my people say. Yeah, freedom, that's what my people want. Freedom, that's what my people say. Yeah.
Sky and landscape drapes adjacent to our retinas, letting us experience samples of what's been set for us. We better clutch and get a touch of the rush before it dissipates. We men of fate that penetrate the interstates that generate
the pace, cause we hustle over breaks. Hip hop was live bait, so we ate until our freight was full. In the belly,
There's some more people watching. Again, if people have complained in the past about the music, if that's annoying you, feel free to let me know. Comments, jump in. I can turn it down, turn it off. I'm not super attached to it, but when I'm not talking to anybody, I enjoy listening to music. I actually only have a small selection of songs uploaded on here. I'm not really interested in uploading my entire library. I'm not surprised. How's this? Any better? It's me on the guitar, by the way. Elfin Chime is my neighbor. Long chat about Chicago elections coming up. A little bit of drama happening in our corner of Chicago. Our aldermen, there were 4 people on the ballot for our aldermen, 3 of which got thrown off the ballot for various reasons. Apparently, one went to court and was just thrown back on the ballot. Yes, I have a Star Wars hat. I used to be a fan. Have you ever seen this hat, CW? I feel like I've worn this a lot. I'd like to have worn it in your presence.
From the first moment I tried to flee from the filthy debris of the land I reside in, provided all the proper papers to stay for the long haul. For the law decided to stretch and give me the strong arm. Long gone from the
I don't know. I prefer not to think about that. I'm sure there's value in thinking about it, but I don't have the brain space for it right now.
I avoid confrontation at all costs. I don't want to get tossed to that border I once crossed. Though I'm exhausted from me, stands a profile. When I look back, I know it'll all be worthwhile. So I smile and sweat to get by. Cause my purpose here is something I just can't let die. If for survival, not survival. We don't deny you, don't deny us. We're just survivors walking this lonely road. Say I. If for survival, not survival. We don't deny you, don't deny us. We're just survivors walking this lonely road. Say I. Survival, not survival. We don't deny you, don't deny us. We're just survivors walking this lonely road. Say I. Here for survival, not survival. We don't deny you, don't deny us. We're just survivors walking this lonely road.
Good afternoon, Kezzy. How are you this morning or afternoon? You guys are 8 hours ahead, right? It's like 6:15. What time do you normally eat dinner? Ooh, jujitsu. So I'm currently taking karate classes with my son and my daughter, and our plan is to try to get close to black belt within the next 3 to 4 years, and then switch over to jujitsu. My son is only 8, so the goal would be by the time he gets high school, he would be pretty well versed in both karate and jujitsu, and then see what he wants to do from there. Which part are you working on first? The kung fu or the drunkenness? Two dinners. I am not familiar with that as a concept. In my family, we do 2 breakfasts. The first breakfast and second breakfast, like an hour and a half later. Well, we've already been going at it for like a year and a half. So theoretically, it would actually be 4.5 to 5 years to achieve that black belt. But yeah, it's ambitious. We actually have our belt exam this weekend, and we're up to green belt. I would be very interested to see you try drunken kung fu technique. I would pay to watch that. When I look back, I know it'll all be worthwhile. So I smile and sweat to get by. Cause my purpose here is something I just can't let die. Here for survival, not survival. We don't deny you, don't deny us. We're just survivors walking this lonely road. Say I. Here for survival, not survival. We don't deny you, don't deny us. We're just survivors walking this lonely road. Say I. Survival, not survival. We don't deny you, don't deny us. We're just survivors walking this lonely road. Say I. Here for survival, not survival. We don't deny you, don't deny us. We're just survivors walking this lonely road. All right.
Yo, I'm not conforming, nor contortionist. I'm aboard in this mission to play me like I'm in an accordion or water with a wide array of purposes. Unfortunate, these lies that can't hold me back from the truth. I choose the path I'm headed in, I'm questioning, I'm pressing, I'm past the lies and the crevices. The wrinkles down with mentioning. I'm best within, I'm best because these lies that can't hold me. Feels like I'm running out of time. Every time I see these lies, oh, I fight to the bottom lies, I fight to the bottom lies. I'm so lately, feels like I'm running out of time. Every time I see these lies, oh, I fight to the bottom lies, I fight to the bottom lies. They say to get in where you fit and I'll throw a fit and get living. Go and get out evicted, don't color outside the limits. Lies that hold in prison, I am soul and infinite, and these lies that cannot hold me. I know I'm aging when lies start to scar and lay up. My face a human race is bordering life is carbon paper. Less than impressive, use of success, impress on you with lies that cannot hold me. Feels like I'm running out of time. Every time I see these lies, oh, I fight to the bottom lies, I fight to the bottom lies. I say lately, feels like I'm running out of time. Every time I see these lies, oh, I fight to the bottom lies, I fight to the bottom lies. What defines me? Oh, alive, be the days I'm walking blindly at the timely age of 95. We need to take a fight, realize we might be fighting with ourselves within the lines that we've drawn inside these lives. We're living in a pipe dream. Need to get outside the boundaries and realize we got freedom at our fingertips. Get a grip into sight, see ourselves beyond the lines, more than fine, certified free. Feels like I'm running out of time. Every time I see these lies, oh, I fight to the bottom lies, I fight to the bottom lies. I say lately, feels like I'm running out of time. Every time I see these lies, oh, I fight to the bottom lies, I fight to the bottom lies.
Sounds good, Khezi. I will be here. I'm sure CW would love to join, but he's dealing with snow.
When the lion drew a line and the sandy crossed the line and said, all you understand to be actually's in a fight with what I am actually. Compassion seems out of mind. You never mind it going some cash and draw the line. That side is minus me, at least as far as I can see. But as far as I can see, my arm to reach, I'm part of me. You ain't far enough, no matter the height, the bar is up. I can jump, I have come to fight in the bottom lines of love. Feels like I'm running out of time. Every time I see these lies, oh, I fight to the bottom lies, I fight to the bottom lies. I say lately, feels like I'm running out of time. Every time I see these lies, oh, I fight to the bottom lies, I fight to the bottom lies. Lately, feels like I'm running out of time. Every time I see these lies, oh, I fight to the bottom lies, I fight to the bottom lies. I say lately, feels like I'm running out of time. Every time I see these lies, oh, I fight to the bottom lies, I fight to the bottom lies. Yo, I'm not conforming, no contortionist. I'm aboard in this mission to play me like I'm in.
How's your friendship with being AI doing these days?
Lies that can't hold me back from the truth. I choose the path I'm headed in, I'm questioning, I'm pressing, I'm past the lies and the crevices. The wrinkles down with mentioning. I'm best within, I'm best because these lies that can't hold me. Feels like I'm running out of time. Every time I see these lies, oh, I fight to the bottom lies, I fight to the bottom lies. I say lately, feels like I'm running out of time. Every time I see these lies, oh, I fight to the bottom lies, I fight to the bottom lies. They say to get in where you fit and I'll throw a fit and get living. Go and get out evicted, don't color outside the limits. Lies that hold in prison, I am soul and infinite, and these lies that cannot hold me. I know I'm aging when lies start to scar and lay up. My face a human race is bordering life is carbon paper. Less than impressive, use of success, impress on you with lies that cannot hold me. Feels like I'm running what defines me. Oh, alive, be the days I'm walking blindly at the timely age of 95. We need to take a fight, realize we might be fighting with ourselves within the lines that we've drawn inside these lives. We're living in a pipe dream. Need to get outside the boundaries and realize we got freedom at our fingertips. Get a grip into sight, see ourselves beyond the lines, more than 5 certified free. Feels like I'm running out of time. Every time I see these lies, oh, I fight to the bottom lines, I fight to the bottom lines. I say lately, feels like I'm running out of time. Every time I see these lies, oh, I fight to the bottom lines, I fight to the bottom lines. When the lion drew a line and the sand, he crossed the line and said, all you understand to be actually is in a fight with what I am actually. Compassion seems out of mind. You never mind it going so cash and draw the line. The side is minus me, at least as far as I can see. But as far as I can see, my arm can reach so hard to me. You ain't far enough, no matter the height, the bar is up. I can jump, I have come to fight in the bottom lines of love. Lately, feels like I'm running out of time. Every time I see these lies, oh, I fight to the bottom lines, I fight to the bottom lines. I say lately, feels like I'm running out of time. Every time I see these lies, oh, I fight to the bottom lines, I fight to the bottom lines. Lately, feels like I'm running out of time. Every time I see these lies, oh, I fight to the bottom lines, I fight to the bottom lines. I say lately, feels like I'm running out of time. Every time I see these lies, oh, I fight to the bottom lines, I fight to the bottom lines.
Sounds amazing. It's just more rock.
For the days before the malaise, before the unaffordable baby race take shape, before they get the pace, get the beats was a stake. Was a piece of dreaming big, was playing safe. Dreaming big and share my days. What a way some would say, get away from the race. Enjoying a day to day, mundane commonplace. They told me you're too different to be a shape. But put you in a box if you were cute, it's a case. Not sleeping out awake, face to face, second rate. I'm ashamed of the weight, I'm insane in this race. Yet can I get away from the way you proclaim fall off on my fate and my face set apart to a state. It's a way of life, never saying to display in the case. What a waste to chase all of my days away, while letting my dreams become an application of my days. Hey, although I fell on my face, it fell in the place. Look, I dwell in this place, hey, overwhelming mistakes, yet developed the grace. I developed this taste for this wonderful maze. And I want, hey, although I fell on my face, it fell in the place. Look, I dwell in this place, hey, overwhelming mistakes, yet developed the grace. I developed this taste for this wonderful maze. You said right, Tony. Said alright only if I would've heard when you said let me guide Tony. So the pen ink so leaked I free wrote. What was me? I wasn't all that free though. See though I can write doesn't mean I write well. That all depends on the story I tell. Truth is vital. Met you in and out of my world upside down and I'm hanging for the tiles and I like it more. If I was walking up right before, there's a measure to the heights I saw. Gravity tries to immobilize the force. I was born to fight like a pilot with a score to sell. I'll never settle for less than the best suit, less to the flesh. I live like the testament says. No need to wonder you. The author of the book, go and take your Pulitzer. Hey, although I fell on my face, it fell in the place. Look, I dwell in this place, made overwhelming mistakes. Yet enveloped in grace. I developed this taste for this wonderful maze. And I want, hey, although I fell on my face, it fell in the place. Look, I dwell in this place, made overwhelming mistakes. Yet enveloped in grace. I developed the fight of the light, the sunrise, man that I've been. So I write this like glass on the line, slots in these eyes, let's dive into the violence. So we all thirst, seeking to find this meaning of life, it's bleeding us right, it's worth all the time, it's making us timeless. It's the last song to write when we write beyond time. Although I fell on my face, it fell in the place. Look, I dwell in this place, made overwhelming mistakes. Yeah, enveloped in grace, I enveloped the space for this wonderful maze. And I want faith. Although I fell on my face, it fell into place. Look, I dwell in this place, made overwhelming mistakes. Yeah, enveloped in grace, I enveloped the space for this wonderful maze.
All right. Turn the music down.
Hello.
Hey,
Mr.
Jacob, how
Pacheco.
are you?
Good. So I thought I got you more subscribers to the Randos United channel, but like
You did. I've seen several. Talked to a few people. It could be early.
Yeah. I'm actually starting on my road trip, and I saw you on, and I was like, should I start on my road trip and get going, or should I procrastinate and talk to Mom?
Procrastination seems the name of the game.
It is. Oh, I should also retweet your thing. Yes. So hopefully more people are watching, other than CW.
Other than CW, yeah. I can always count on CW.
Hey, Chazi was on.
He was on too. He said he might jump on a little bit later after the kids are down.
So, what have you been up to?
Oh man! So I've had 2 sick kids for the past like 4 days,
And they always come in pairs.
They always come in pairs. Luckily, my son hasn't gotten sick at all, which is shocking. But yeah, so then trying to juggle that. My wife and I had gotten tickets to see Les Mis last night. And so then it's like, okay, well, I have to get anything that I was hoping to get done in the evening, done during the day, while I have 2 sick kids at home. But I was able to get a bit of accomplishment. I wasn't able to like jump on yesterday like I was hoping to. But we got our date night.
Cool. I have kind of been pressuring people to start talking to you, and maybe you want to start figuring out some sort of schedule for people to be streaming. I know Father Eric has his stream on Sundays at 5:30 at my time, and Mark has been streaming on my channel Friday evenings because that I don't stream on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
And that's been pretty popular, but he goes for like 5 to 9 hours. And yeah, I'm gonna be away for a while, but there are people who should be able, and I'm sure Nate from Grail Country would be interested, but like, yeah, getting some sort of regular schedule going. Maybe even ask Paul Vanderklay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I actually had a conversation, I think Monday night with Gavin.
Okay.
Euro LFG about different ideas around that. I had a similar conversation with Adam as well about how to get some of those things going. So I know the highest priority on my list this week is really getting this whole Foundation Incorporated. I have a conversation scheduled probably later this evening with an attorney.
Okay.
To get a lot of that stuff going, and then next week, once some of that stuff is established, it'll be easier. I mean, I do try to plan on being on here around this time for a couple hours each day. Next week it'll be tricky because I'm doing some intensive courses at Calvin Seminary in so I'll be in Grand Rapids. I think this time slot is still free for me.
If you're going to be in Grand Rapids, I should have Jonathan contact you. Jonathan is in Noah Hyde, so he's active on my channel, and he went to Calvin College, and he lives near there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What was I going to say? So, did you get the purpose for the corporation hammered out? I thought that would be really difficult to get.
So I've got like a rough draft that I've sent to potential board members.
Okay.
So far, the only feedback I've gotten is like, "Hey, I like it. It's a good start," and yada yada. So I've encouraged some questions, criticisms, additions, etc., to kind of come down the pipeline. So I've sent, I've encouraged people to kind of get that going today. If I don't have any comments or whatever from there, I'm just going to continue on with the incorporation. If things need to get modified later, I can always do so.
Garth has been promising me to do some Just Chatting streams eventually, and he's for months and months and months been preparing. The purpose is the only thing that's kind of set in stone, because once you use that for your incorporation, it cannot be changed. You would have to reincorporate. So,
Well, and apparently I was looking over the, incorporating in Texas, and I looked over those documents.
Okay.
Man, it's really easy.
Yeah. Oh, no. Incorporating.
Because I've incorporated in Illinois a few different organizations. I'm like, it's a little bit more burdensome.
Really? It shouldn't be that much more burdensome.
I mean, it's not in the grand scheme of things. It's just that there's certain things that are included in the documentation in Illinois that are not included in the Texas one. And so I was like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, California incorporation's not bad either. And honestly, it's not the incorporation that it's the 501c3 application and everything else and once you're looking for the 501c3, you kind of have to have your bylaws as well.
Yeah.
And that stuff gets more complex, but incorporation generally shouldn't be such a thing. Let me see if I can get Jonathan to jump on.
That's good, because I don't.
Yeah, so someone in our local estuary used ChatGPT to summarize a comment I had made. Not sure how I feel about that. Well, CW, I often feel like you need an interpreter.
Is AI interpreter the correct kind of interpreter for CW?
Well, so, okay. I don't know if you ever watched the discussion between William Lane Craig and Sir Roger Penrose on Unbelievable. Do you know
how long ago would that have been?
A couple of years ago.
Yeah, I've watched a lot of conversations that William Lane Craig have had, so I don't know off the top of my head.
So Sir Roger Penrose is probably the most prominent cosmologist alive today. He won the Nobel Prize in Physics two years ago.
Okay.
And the discussion he had with William Lane Craig was way up here, right?
Yeah.
But it was one of those discussions that, like, I wish every science professor in the entire world was forced to. Hello, Chezi. When I announced my final Just Chatting stream, Chezi was like, "Are you actually?" He seemed to have thought I was actually, like, never just chatting again. So, because I'm guessing he's like, okay, Jacob can't be keeping this up all this time. He's probably going to go back to actually being a productive member of humanity. That's not going to happen.
Wishful thinking.
So, the discussion, it was really important, and I think for people who understand it, it would really shatter. No live streams on the road. That's just going to be too difficult. Maybe.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's already a yes. Once you leave the realm of no, Jacob, it's becoming a yes.
Well, it'll depend on my connection, but it's pretty filled. It's pretty filled.
How is it? So you're heading. You start out. You're heading straight north, right?
Right. So, big mistake I made. There's somebody in Santa Barbara I meant to meet up with, and I forgot to message him until this morning. Mobile Happy Cam. Oh my God. You okay? So Happy loves sticking her head out the window, and I can see it on my whatchamacallit,
mirror.
My mirror. It is the cutest thing in the world. It just is. There's nothing happier than a dog sticking her dog at her head out the window when you're going 70 miles per hour.
I get super paranoid when I used to have my dog, when she would put her head out the window while I was driving, because she was pretty hyperactive too. I was just always terrified that she was just going to jump.
Well, Happy's 80 pounds, and I do not leave the window open enough for her to be able to even leave it. So, yeah. But William Lane Craig, right? So, but the conversation was at such a high level. I was like, it's very hard to get people to actually, and I didn't completely understand what they were saying. So I got Sam and Ginger Bill. I don't know if you know Ginger Bill.
I don't know Ginger Bill.
He's one of the regulars around here. And he's really, really smart, knows his physics really well, And so I figured, okay, these two really smart guys could have a conversation and kind of bring that conversation down to everyone else's levels. And so I specifically asked them, I prodded them, I begged them to make a video. They make a video. Oh my God, I'm sitting there listening, and they start at the level of the conversation of William Lane Craig and Roger Penrose and kick it up a notch.
The opposite.
I was like, okay, guys, like, I had a hard enough time understanding that conversation. Like, when you guys are like digging deep into these concepts in ways that, like, I have no clue what you're saying.
Yeah, that is a tricky thing, like to translate complex ideas into ways that, like, lay people or common people can understand. And even by common, I'm not like talking about dumb. I'm just talking about like regular people that are intelligent, educated.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to find the same thing with like jazz. Like you get into high levels of jazz and it's hard to follow. And it's hard to explain. And I used to struggle with this with young people all the time when I would teach music. Like, oh, jazz, I don't get it. It's so boring and blah, blah. But a lot of times it was because it existed, or certain aspects of jazz exist at this high level that it's hard for the average person to digest.
But you know what's really weird? So the other day, Chezi and I start talking about the symbol of rainbows in Judaism. Okay? And, there he is. Speaking of, this is Jonathan. Jonathan Mo. Jonathan.
Hi, Jonathan.
Hello, Mo. From across the lake.
All right. I'll be there next week.
Oh, yeah? You coming to Rome?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I have to do a week of intensive courses there, mostly in the mornings.
Okay. You coming to the campus, college, or the university, rather?
Yep.
Cool.
Mainly in, I think, the seminary portion of it.
Oh, yeah. Never visited there.
It's the rest of the campus is nicer, in my opinion. I mean, it's much bigger.
It's all pretty drab.
Yeah.
It's got that kind of modernist architecture.
Yeah, I liked Calvin.
I mean,
should I say Servetus University?
I dig the design, but it's not very user friendly.
Yeah, it all depends on what you're comparing it to. For me, it's like I haven't been on a whole lot of college campuses, and so it was just like, oh well, this is much better than where I went.
So back to the conversation about it. Actually started with Noahides and why rainbows aren't really a good symbol for the Noahide movement. And so Nechama asked a kind of technical question, which was did she do the right thing or the wrong thing of posting a picture she had taken of a rainbow on her social media? And Chezi and I start having this really technical conversation where I pulled out books from my bookshelf that like 99.9% of people have, like, if I named the book, you would have no clue what it is, right? And we're having this really in-depth conversation about Jewish law. And I have to say, I have gotten more positive comments on that conversation, and people being like, I really liked when you and, Chezi were discussing that. It's like, it's a minute little discussion and why people on YouTube who aren't even Jewish would have any interest in that. Like, I would have never guessed.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is the idea of translation, right? There's a lot of people are interested in ideas, but if you don't understand the language being used, you can't engage with those ideas. And so even though you have different populations really interested in the same idea, it's hard to engage it together if you don't have a shared language around it.
So somebody asked, Elijah wanted to do a book club, a Jewish book club. I was like, great. So he picks the last book I would ever choose, and that people are going through it, and it's like people are like, Sandy is involved. She seems to really like the book, and I'm like, I don't understand people sometimes. Raj and Chad had a conversation. Chad, was that on your channel?
I think I saw that on the Discord, Bridges of Meaning Discord, in the promos, one of the promos things.
I could believe it. I am not on the Bridges of Meaning Discord.
It's on Raj's channel.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Raj told me he was going to start a channel. We're actually going to have dinner tomorrow and talk about it.
Very cool.
Anybody in the Sacramento area who wants to come to dinner with us, they're welcome.
Hezi said that he does dinner at 9 and 11. Do you do 2 dinners?
Hezi, who does dinner? Where?
I asked Hezi what time he has dinner. He said 9 and again at 11.
You've got a joke.
Maybe he's a midnight snacker.
That was earlier today, and I was like, oh, I've never heard of people doing. Well, I guess I never called it 2 dinners. When I was in college, I would just eat multiple times a day. But
I am wondering what he means by that. Especially if you're actually having a Jewish, if you're having a Jewish meal, it can. People tend to even so calling it several. That's okay. Hezi, I don't understand you sometimes.
You know what? I think why the rainbow conversation is interesting is because people are genuinely curious about what Jews believe and think, and so it's kind of novel. Number one, and number two, it's like I think the demographic here kind of nerds out about the minutia, right? And so it's like it's interesting in a nerdy way. Outside of just like learning something about a religion that, you know, we all seem to be a part of or have come from, but yet don't know a lot about.
Well, and a lot of Jewish ideas are typically filtered for a lot of people through Protestant thought.
For sure, 100%, yeah. And then once you start learning about some of the ways in which they're not, if you ask the Jews what they think about things, and it sounds very different than what you've learned being filtered through Christianity, then you know that obviously takes you down a very deep rabbit hole.
Well, and not only rabbit hole, but like with a bunch of different branches, right? Because,
for sure.
It's the same thing with Christianity, right? Well, which version, you know?
For sure, yeah. And I lived that life too. So
yeah.
Jason says something that I mean, it's funny, but it's cute, and I wonder about. He says when he hears me describing Judaism, he thinks that's just the Bible. That's just Christianity. That's what I thought. You know, I just thought that was Christianity.
Yeah, I think there needs to be this matrix of propositional beliefs with like Christians believe, Jews believe, Christians believe that Jews believe, and Jews believe that Christians believe. And then you have kind of the, you know, all right, well, these things are non-controversial. And so like we are all on the same page. We have the same mental model, same definitions. We can talk about these things coherently. But then all the other things where it's like, I don't think that means what you think it means, or vice versa from the different groups. Like that's where I think the interesting dialogue happens.
Yeah, so, also depending on levels, right? Because it's easy for me to always go back to music, but what is pop music? Well, pop music just takes all these different things that kind of appeal to the masses and puts them together, and this is why so many people consume it, because it's like, well, what's the basest idea that we can get everybody on board with? And a lot of times it's a pulsing beat, 4 chords. But as you want to move up higher, obviously it's going to get a little bit more diverse.
Yeah. I think you start getting into more, you'll branch out into more specialization, more, more nuance, more hair splitting, right? Like, I like a lot of different music from a lot of different genres, but my what I like in those genres is very narrow. So it's like I like metal, but I have to caveat that completely with like only these 5 bands. and they don't necessarily have much in common or like differ from these other bands, but there's like little aesthetic things, right? And I think that translates to my taste in like classical music. It's like I like this music, but only these composers and all that kind of stuff. So that said, like when it comes to theology, I'm not in the pick and choose camp. I'm more of the what's the truth camp, in terms of like I want to respond to it more than make my own menu.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I can see how there's similarity there.
It also applies in a cultural dynamic because I within the church right now, especially the Protestant church, there's a lot of ideas around culture, Latino culture, Black culture, etc. And say, well, Blacks were blah blah blah, or Latinos. If you're in a Latino church, it's like, well, there's actually quite a bit of diversity within Black churches. There's quite a bit of diversity within Latino churches. Well, which Latino? And then which denomination occupied by which Latino population? It gets really. So the blanket statements, maybe in general, have some truth elements to them, but the moment you start digging in a little bit, it becomes a lot more shaky as to whether or not that's a true statement.
Yeah, I was thinking about when you were talking about that just now, like the dynamics of like Catholic churches, Catholic parishes. There's not sort of there are definitely culturally flavored Catholic parishes, but the dynamic of having there's no Black church in Catholicism in the same way that there's Black church in Protestantism, or Latino Pentecostals, or whatever. You get the cultural impact is comes out differently, right? What do you make of that?
That's a good question. I think to a certain degree, what I make of it is the nature of Protestantism, and this is a bit off the top of my head, so feel free to shoot all the holes in it you want. The nature of Protestantism is to break off and create a separate branch. So the main, ethos around Catholicism is we are one church, and so we'll have a Black or Latino version, but it's still this church.
Yeah.
And so within Protestantism, we don't like what that people group is doing, so we're going to create our own, and we're going to call it this title. And then when you get a group of them together, well, how do you classify them? It becomes really difficult to classify.
Yeah, sure. So the structure makes it easier to have kind of go all in on cultural differences and really zero in on some of those things, and the dynamic can change. There's the window is sort of wider, the frame is wider, or doesn't exist in the same way.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I think with the Catholic Church, for instance, to get the real sense of the major, the broader cultural differences, you have to actually go to different countries, right? And you see more than just, I think, superficial differences. You start to see theological differences, or those characterizations, right? The German church is much more liberal than the African church, for instance, right? And so you'll see that reflected, I think, in the way they do liturgies and such. Do you think that's is the fragmentation, right, of Protestantism, is that a mark against it, or a mark or for it, right? Does it tell us anything? Does it mean anything?
So I've been trying to wrap my head around that a bit, because I think there are pros and there are cons. I have found it fascinating that within Christianity you have these three main branches, right? You have Eastern Orthodoxy as kind of a branch, and it has its own subtleties there, maybe spin-offs. You have Catholicism, which will have its orders, Carmelites, Jesuits, etc. Then you have Protestantism that is just kind of all over the place.
And so, qualitatively different, I would say, right? Because the catechism of the Orthodox and Catholic churches are the same catechism, whether you have a monastic life or you live in one country versus another. But the creeds and confessions of Protestantism is diverse to say the least, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes mutually exclusive, or at least mutual condemning. But yeah.
But it does create a certain environment for experimental thought
Yeah.
that can be tricky to maintain within the other streams. And I'm saying this out of quite a bit of ignorance in terms of those other streams.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned like the religious orders in the Catholic Church. So like, I think the idea there is that different ways of living, different, they call them charisms, or like, kind of expressions of the faith, living monastically, living in the world, living apart from the world, right? They tend to have the same kind of trappings of the monastic life, right? And so and then I guess there were some Catholic groups like lay movements and stuff, like Opus Dei is the only one that comes to my head, but there are, I think, lots of other ones out there for like lay spirituality, right? They're often informed by these different monastic groups, right? And so, but they don't translate, I guess, in the same way that I think you're talking about with Protestantism, where like you have different liturgies and different, frankly, different beliefs. And so I don't know, like, I guess I'd be curious to like think about what's the situation that Protestantism enables that Catholicism maybe doesn't enable, and like, is that a good, like, is that a good situation to support, or a good context? I'm like for instance, can you have like guitars at mass? Well, I mean, there's people that will argue pro and con on that one, right? But like, I don't know that it's like there's nothing about Catholicism that says you can't use certain instruments or something, right? But you probably can't get rid of the fundamental elements of the liturgy, right? And still call yourself Catholic. But like, does that limit anything that a Protestant would want to do in church or spiritually, right? They couldn't work within those confines.
Yeah. Now, CW has brought this up. We've actually talked about this quite a bit, but what is it? The Protestant, the idea of the institutional, like where does the institution fit within this idea of the body? Because to a certain degree, like within Catholicism, the Catholic Church is the church. Like the institution is the church. Where I think a mindset within Protestantism is the church is the people and the institutions kind of serve the church. So in the hierarchy, you have this church, and then the institutions that call themselves the church are underneath that, supporting it, so to speak.
Yeah, I think the Catholic Church just believes in a visible and an invisible church. They don't, and they see them as one and the same. They would see the visible church as the manifestation of the institutional church. And so I don't know that it's like I guess I would maybe characterize, like the Catholic view would say it's a both and, it's visible and invisible, and it's one and the same. And it has its physical incarnation in the institutional church. I think the Orthodox would largely say the same thing. They just wouldn't point to the same hierarchy and would say that the West broke off from the original trunk. But I don't think most Protestants don't point to a visible church because either they don't believe in it or it doesn't really work for their argument.
And which one comes first, right?
Well,
it doesn't work, so we don't believe it, or vice versa.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think the Catholic Church, the visible church Christianity folks have to deal with people who are invisibly or imperfectly members of that church, right? That's how there can be no salvation outside of the church, while at the same time admitting that people who are not visible members could still be saved, right? Like that's kind of the way they make that work.
Well, and Bishop Barron, often says that, he wishes that instead of Lutheranism being the beginning of the Protestantism, that it would have worked better as like a Lutheran order within the Catholic Church. And to a certain degree, there might be truth in that, except for that would not have been tolerated within the Catholic Church at that time.
Well, but the Lutherans weren't trying to come up with some kind of spirituality or way of like connecting to God. They were protesting against, real or perceived or imaginary abuses within the church, and the church had its own Counter-Reformation.
Yeah,
And
the Lutherans at the time, the goal was to reform that existing church, not necessarily initially. It wasn't to split off.
Yeah, and I think then shit just got out of control.
Yeah,
with the printing press, the political world in which I think there were external forces that were working to promote or not the Lutheran Protestant movement generally. So
yeah,
it's a complicated one for sure.
And I think that to a certain degree, I think the Protestant Reformation was helpful for the Catholic Church to start attempting to reform its church.
Yeah, I'd admit that. Sure.
And so, to a certain degree, I do think that the Protestantism is necessary to a certain degree to keep the Catholic Church in check, so to speak. Like there is this iron sharpening iron aspect of it.
Yeah, Tim, what's up, man? You want to get in here? Jump in.
Just a couple of things real quick. I'm taking a quick break from work here. With regard to the Protestant Reformation, I also learned recently that there were a lot of reformers before Luther, and that he was kind of coming from a tradition within Catholicism of reform, of reformatio, and the institution of the papacy at his time was a result of other reformations that had happened before. He wasn't really starting, doing something unheard of within the Catholic Church at the time.
Yeah. He wasn't the only reformer for sure. Mm-hmm. And like during that time, and then there was other reform episodes in the church earlier. I think even the Benedictine era, like of Saint Benedict, there were abuses. I mean, there's lots of saints out there who, got their sainthood from going up against the hierarchy, and are now. I mean, they weren't martyrs necessarily, but like they're now revered as doctors of the church or otherwise holy people who stood up against the institution.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention, you guys were talking about like the ecclesiology and defining groups, and drilling down into all the different kind of embodiments of Protestantism. You're talking about Black churches, etc., and how even within the Black church there's other divisions within them. Aside from the like ecclesiology, ecclesiology of that, I feel like it's like the fractal nature of like if you're trying to map a coastline, how much detail do you drill down on the coastline before you have the true shape of the country? I think it's kind of like that. You have every community is a little bit different. Every community has all these different ways that they are similar to others and not similar. Mm-hmm. And you talked about the Orthodox Church. I'm Orthodox. I'm in the Greek Orthodox Church, and there's all kinds of things that people say about the Greek Orthodox Church, and be true and not true, and then there's the West Coast, the San Francisco metropolis of the Greek Orthodox Church, and then there's Northern California within that, and every level you drill down, you're going to get some kind of distinctive. And it just really never ends. It never ends. And within the parish, of course, there's all kinds of different people in it. But the Orthodox, you mentioned different types of cultures within Catholic parishes and different movements within the Catholic Church. I think you could say that, for example, like the different branches in America, the different Orthodox jurisdictions.
Yeah.
We have Greek, the Russian, the Antiochians, etc. you might draw an analogy to that, because really it's simply just the ethnic group that church came from. I mean,
Yeah.
other than that, it's the same. But then, of course, you're going to have like very distinct flavors when you go to those different churches within those groups. So,
yeah, I think most every Christian group is ethnically flavored, no matter where you go. Orthodox, Catholic, Protestant. It's just, I think that the like we were talking about with Mo, like I was saying with Mo, where the window for Protestantism is much wider in terms of expression of that like local or like ethnic or cultural character, right? There's fewer rules, there's fewer trappings of I guess I'll call it unity, but I don't know how else to express it. Like, you're still going to have the iconography of Orthodox churches is going to persist across Orthodox space, irrespective of, if it's Romanian or Greek or whatever, right? And so I think those are the things I think we maybe argue about and fight about more, right? Those things that are like meant to be universal versus those things which are allowed to be monkeyed with or expressed based on like local preference or whatnot, right?
I'm very curious about, it's a little bit of a side topic, but I'm very, very curious about what the Chinese church is like. I understand they primarily they've been evangelized by Protestants. I'm sure that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I know a little bit, and a very little bit in terms of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church operates with an unofficial underground episcopacy, and that's the one that's recognized by Rome, at least historically. I'm not sure what the current status of things is. I haven't paid attention in a bit. And then they have like official Catholic churches where the bishops are at least approved, if not appointed. I think maybe just approved by the Communist Party. So there's kind of a tense relationship there between, the approved and unapproved Catholic Church in China. I don't know the status of, I guess, Orthodox and Protestantism in China, but that's kind of the broad Catholic picture.
Orthodox is non-existent as far as I know.
Yeah, and I don't actually know what the underground versus approved Catholic churches, like how it manifests in like their liturgy and their beliefs. Like I'm not entirely sure. I think it's less surface than, it's like below the surface and not at that level.
My impression is that in terms of numbers, the Protestant groups are the largest. Is that correct?
It wouldn't surprise me. Just if you collect all the fragments and you aggregate them, they might be bigger, at least in China. I don't know. I don't know about China.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that stuff is really interesting to think about. And then the other aspect of is to consider these things throughout time, right? So you have a Catholic Church in its iteration now. Let's say we're just talking about European Catholics or even just American Catholics. What would be the significant differences between that now versus, say, the 16th century? In terms of beliefs, in terms of practice, liturgical practice, etc. Those are interesting things, and similar with Protestants, like reforms. What would be if you looked at a Reformed church, let's say Calvin's church in Geneva, and compare that to various Reformed churches, Presbyterian, CRC, etc. Now, what would be some significant differences? Would I consider myself in that category? It's hard to say.
Yeah, like it's. I mean, I think the Catholic position, or at least I don't know who would dispute this, but before Vatican II, I think most Catholics would argue that if you go back in time, you would recognize the liturgy all the way back to roughly the time of the apostles, at least in its basic form. But that said, like a lot of Protestants, maintain that similar kind of liturgy. Clearly, the Orthodox, can make a claim on, the liturgy being, going back in time too. But I think after Vatican II for the Catholics and the liturgical changes that were made, there's some significant differences. Language, orientation. I think that like you have to be, if you had no idea what you were looking at and you looked at, Catholic Mass in 1950 versus 1970, whatever, in a given church, in America, let's just say, you would, I think it's a pretty shocking difference. If you're more educated or, theologically sophisticated and kind of like, okay, they're still doing the same things, but these are the justifications for these reasons. They're, obviously it's superficial to say, okay, they're going from Latin to English because it's the vernacular. But I mean, the priests used to be in the front at the altar, leading the people and not facing away from the people, but everyone's pointed in the same direction. And now suddenly there's, a table at the front with the priest on the other side looking at everybody else, right? When I became Catholic, that was just normal. And, that was late 90s, early aughts. And I actually discovered the traditional Catholicism after I had already converted. So like, clearly there was something about the church that was compelling for a Protestant, to still convert and become Catholic. But I am personally somewhat floored sometimes when I hear about people like, I just joined the church this year. I'm like, you joined that church now? Okay. Like, but I get it. But yeah, I think it's pretty different, but, I don't know where the records are in terms of Protestant, forms, order of worship and forms of worship back in the Calvin Geneva days and stuff. Like, I'd imagine it's largely, I would guess that it follows the same, mostly stable movement until maybe just recently. Right? I think I've mentioned on this channel, like I grew up in the Reformed Church of America.
Okay.
So I think, either the CRC or the RCA, I can't remember, one of them broke off over the use of Dutch in the liturgy. And so, both very active in Dutch West Michigan. And then I think the RCA had its own issues with, breakages and stuff. I think my church that I grew up in either got kicked out or left because of, women's ordination or, ordaining a lesbian or something, like that. So I don't know if the CRC is catching up to those situations, but anyway, the point being is like those churches had a lot in common to the point where they broke off over something that in retrospect seems very small, but I mean, so superficially, what do they look like in difference? Like at the time of their split, very, very little.
Yeah. And I mean, to a certain degree, wouldn't that be similar for every split, right? The split between East and West.
Well, I don't know. If you add a massively, meaning changing word to, the Nicene Creed, I can understand like the havoc that would wreak. I mean, I'm sympathetic to the Orthodox position, such that it is where like, if you're saying that the Father or the Son proceeds, or the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son, like that has major implications, I guess, to the rest of theology. But your point's taken. I mean, there are some splits where it's just like, is this really the right thing to be doing? And I guess, Protestantism doesn't have the natural
your
safety
point,
net.
like, for example, that you're right. I think that is a big deal. And then some of the splits, like, for example, the women and church office split, or the reason that a lot of people left the CRC, maybe it was similar to RCA. I'm less familiar there. Like, there's a lot of people that believe that the implications of that are vast. And so what would happen in, like, the medieval times, or even around the time of the Reformation? Well, you believe that's different. Well, sorry, you're going to have to die. If you believe that strongly about it, you have to die. And then all of a sudden, there was this affording of, well, we believe that strongly about it, and we don't have to die. We can just split off. And then that became its own. And now it's like, and then once you split off, you start drifting, and then there's more splits and more splits. And then,
well, then the power gets diffused, right? And I think that's then you can't burn your heretics anymore, because there's not enough consolidated power to enforce that, right? Like, I think it's notable that even if Calvin burned his enemies at the stake, like, it didn't take long before that kind of just stopped happening. At least, that became less and less the norm. And I think it's less because that was a function of Protestant belief or doctrine, and more just about the fact that politically there just wasn't enough power to sort of allow that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
Which is an interesting thing to think about too, when I think about, like, in a future where if power gets consolidated again to any particular religious group or not, what are the outcomes, right? Like, I think if, it's easy in this day and age for me to be a Noahide, for instance, or for, like, a lot of these conversations to happen out in the open. But, if I was living in Catholic Christendom, I'm not sure that, I'm not sure that I'd even be feeling as willing to even entertain these conversations, right? Like, I think I would have felt much more compelled to, well, I guess it wouldn't be on my radar. What have you made progress on the statement of faith? It seems to get everyone's undies in a bunch. Like,
so right now I have kind of an iteration of a mission statement. So, because right now my main goal, my target, is to try to have this thing incorporated by Friday. And so in order to do that, I know that I need to have a mission statement. And so I've drafted. Well, I'm terrible at writing mission statements. I always have been. I've started a couple of companies, and that mission statement is always.
Have you used
limiting?
Have you used ChatGPT yet?
What's that?
Have you used ChatGPT, the AI?
I have not. I have not.
I'm telling you, it would if you give it enough of the bullet points that you want to, like, convey, it will write you a beautiful mission statement.
Well, for me, the part of the problem is trying to get the bullet points. But I have a few of the bullet points. I've come up with a draft statement. I've sent it to people that I want to kind of initially be part of the board. Just to say, hey, can you guys get behind this? If not, what do you think ought to be tweaked? So far, I've just gotten a bunch of thumbs up. So I think it's something that can be gotten behind.
What do you know? What state you're going to be incorporating?
I'm trying to incorporate into Texas.
Okay.
It's only $25.
Cheap and friendly to the cause.
Cheap and friendly, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I understand, for what it's worth. Like, I just kind of joined this space. I got here through PVK and met Jacob and got on this Discord, so I don't have much of a horse in the race here. I can kind of, I sympathize though with the idea of wanting to put an actual institution behind it, so you can actually do things and have the legal entity, and then have it be faith-based for the protections of what the entity is going to be up to and the different players are up to. But then, of course, this is a extremely diverse and I'd say highly open but somewhat disagreeable populace.
That's what I'm finding.
Well, at least like those are the loudest voices, and like I guess that's just sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. But like, so you're gonna have a hard time, I think, saying something that is going to be like, if it's too specific, you're going to alienate people. But if it's not specific enough, you're going to get hammered about being like mealy mouthed and like, this is.
I think I lost your vocals. Can I hear you? I still can't hear you. All right. So for those few people that are still watching, yeah, I'm all open to the criticisms. The disagreeable people, I enjoy them. I enjoy the criticisms. The difficult part is, in my enjoyment, I want to avoid antagonizing anyone for their disagreeableness. I don't want to feel like I'm poking at people.
How about now?
Yeah, perfect now.
Stupid StreamYard. Yeah, so I was just saying, like, you're going to get it from both sides, because if you're too specific, you're going to alienate people. If you're too vague, you're going to get hammered for being like, kind of pointless and mealy-mouthed. But it's got to say something to get that faith-based organization protection.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where it may not be like, I'm still figuring, once we're incorporated, there's going to be a lot more stuff that I can do. That's why I'm trying to get it done Friday or by Friday, so that after that, when people ask questions, what is the mission statement? Well, it's just this. Like it or leave it. That's what it is. And I don't mind, like, and I was just saying a minute ago when you had jumped off, that I don't mind the criticism. What I'm trying to avoid is antagonizing those disagreeable people. Because I actually enjoy getting the negative feedback. It forces me to think. I just don't want to come off as the a-hole that, oh, he's enjoying this, and I don't like that he's enjoying it. And it's like, no, that's not it. I don't know necessarily that I'm enjoying it so much as that I appreciate it.
Well, I mean, I appreciate that you're in a hard spot, because you have been lurking, I guess, for a while, but you weren't sort of a common appearance in the group. And so you're an unknown quantity. There's a lot of trust that needs to get built up, right? And so it's hard to come in and just be like, I'm the new boss. I mean, because in some sense you are. And so, it'll just take some time. But I think it's probably okay to do a little saber rattling and weed out the malcontents. I don't know, like, but I think that the malcontents have been very happy to come to you. So
when I feel like every malcontent person that I've encountered so far has been willing to talk.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And have a conversation. And then once we have a conversation, the trust begins to be built. And so far it's worked out really well. I don't think I've had anybody that has approached me and said something negative.
Yeah.
Where it's kind of stayed there.
Yeah. So well, I mean, if I had to characterize the dissenting views, I think like this is an important place for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to see it get ruined, even though it is a voluntary association and they can just leave. I mean, no one's going to get tied up and burned at the stake for not signing the statement of faith or whatever it is. But like,
yeah.
But no one wants to see the whole thing fall apart over some kind of bureaucratic move or some change like that. So, I get that.
Yeah, it is kind of glad that or a good thing that we can't burn anybody at the stake.
I mean, it might, maybe it is, maybe it would be a good thing.
Well, and a good thing in two directions, right? A good thing in terms of
who's the philosopher
of oneself. Like,
Well, yeah. Who's the philosopher that says like, you have to do ethics as if like you wake up one day and you don't know like, which side of the coin you're going to be on? Like, are you in the power position or the oppressed position? And so,
and there is something about being the oppressed that is valuable, that I think for people who have not been oppressed, they miss out on. Like, it's not like, oh, there's this idea about privilege, that privilege itself is not oppressive. And I think, privilege can be oppressive, and that you don't have the same pressures to figure out who you are, what you really actually believe or are willing to stand for. If you never have to stand for anything, there is a certain oppression to that.
Wait. If you don't have to stand for anything, are you in the oppressed or the oppressor position?
I think people consider you, if you don't ever have to stand for anything, they consider you the oppressor.
But for sure, because you have the privilege of not having to, I guess, duck and cover and, sort of live with that kind of anxiety.
But there's an oppression that comes along with that. That it's just like,
because how can you? Yeah, but what is that oppression? Like, how would you define it? I know what you're saying, but I guess I can't. I don't have a ready articulation for that.
Yeah, I'm not sure I do either. So I'm trying to figure that out too. But it's one of those. There is like, I always tell my wife that I have brown privilege. Like,
right.
I can go into, like, on my corner, there'll be sometimes 6 guys. Maybe a couple of them might be armed. They're the aggressive types. I have the privilege of walking past those guys, maybe even engaging them in a conversation, and not being scared.
Right. You won't get harassed or
even if I am, I feel like I'm comfortable enough to deal with whatever harassment might come my way. Because I've experienced it before, and I know that I can get through it. That's something that somebody of maybe that has privileged status may not have. They can't walk through that. They might feel a lot more anxiety about that. So there's benefits of being oppressed, so to speak, that oppressors will never get to experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I think if you find yourself in a different context, in a different environment, the tables can turn, right? The power dynamics shift.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what you're describing. And then we're talking about it when most of us talk about, when we're all talking about like conversations around oppressor oppressed, we're talking more at the large political cultural level, like in general, right?
Yeah. But being oppressed allows you to a certain degree to prove yourself. There's a great line in a song that was popular in the 90s from the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones. And the line says, "I'm not a coward, I've just never been tested. But I'd like to think that if I was, I would pass." Yes. And what happens when you're in an environment that you can never be tested? You can never find out if you're a coward or not.
Yeah, it's like the problem of like the trust fund kids or something, right? Like, will they ever be able to be something on their own without, all the trappings of wealth that they grew up in and stuff?
So how do you know if you were threatened with a gun to your head or being burned at the stake? How do you know that you would be proven brave or worthy to stand before God, or whatever that is?
And that's why I don't go around saying that like, yeah, I would be able to withstand that. Like I would, I would probably, ask God to avoid that sort of scenario, right? Like, I think sometimes, we all have like, martyrdom sounds so glorious. I'm just like, no, I want to be spared of that. Like, no thanks. Like, if the time comes, like, I would hope that I can rise up, but like, I mean, it'd be foolhardy to like actually want that. It's awful, right? Are you in Chicago proper, or Chicagoland, or?
I'm in Chicago proper.
Yeah.
Like the stuff that you read about on the news is where I live.
Like Austin kind of area?
I'm just east of Austin, in an area called Garfield Park.
Oh, I got married there at the conservatory.
Oh, really? I live like right across the street.
Yeah, there were we had a hard time getting cabs. This was like the pre-Uber days, and
The
so
conservatory is beautiful. Everybody goes to the conservatory. You cross the street, not so much anymore.
yeah, we had to do some serious carpooling, last-minute shenanigans to get everybody out of there.
How did
Saturday.
you end up getting married at the Garfield Park Conservatory?
I lived in Chicago at the time with my wife. So I lived in Chicago from around 2005 to 2012 in Logan Square and Bucktown.
Yeah, so that's where I spent like my first early childhood years. Logan Square, Bucktown.
Yeah, totally. So like the Puerto Rican festival every year would be, a madhouse there over near Armitage in California. Like,
Yep. Tasty Freeze.
Yep, Tasty Freeze. Yep. So I know the area. I don't know the West Side as well, but yeah, we were looking for affordable venues for getting married in Chicago proper, and that was a good one, and it was gorgeous. It's beautiful.
And what did you get married?
2012.
Okay, so I got married in 2011, and we were considering the conservatory because it was very affordable.
Yeah.
But their caterers were not the preferred.
Yeah, we used Harry Carey, which was on the preferred list.
Oh, it wasn't.
And
then
it wasn't
we also
too bad.
wanted a wedding of about reception of over 300, and they couldn't host that.
Yeah. We weren't that popular, but I think we got close to 200 or whatever. We didn't have a problem with their maximum, but it went off. I guess with a hitch.
Yeah, I mean it's a beautiful location. My wife's side was small, but my side was, Puerto Rican family. The Clown of Babylon, I don't know who that is, but they said, don't you think some people want meaning so badly that martyrdom seems desirable? Yes, and that's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah, but I think they're fools, right? Or maybe they should think through that a little more.
Well, see, that's the thing that I wrestle with is I don't know if it's foolish. Like it seems foolish, right? It says that about the gospel, right? It's foolish to some people.
Yeah, it does feel like a pretty Christian idea, which is one of those kind of like deconstruction things for me. Now kind of looking towards Judaism, like I don't know. Jacob took off, but like, I don't think Judaism is as down with self-sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I wanted to ask Jacob about like, Jesus line about, greater love has no man than to lay down his life for his friends.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does that mean, and how is that understood from a Jewish perspective?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, because it is often romantic to say stuff like, I would give my life for my kids. I would give my life for my wife. I love them to that degree that my life seems secondary.
Yeah, and I think, the parental instincts are strong, as you know, and so like you might find yourself naturally doing things that are pretty risky in order to de-risk a situation with your kids' lives. But I think the martyrdom that being discussed is about dying for a true belief, mm-hmm. or being suffering for a cause, and not necessarily family or something that specific.
Yeah, I mean, and I think I agree with that, but it's one of those things where, because a lot of times those causes will have effect for the people that you love, right? I mean, I think of somebody like Martin Luther King. I don't think he was intending to get himself killed, but he got killed, but he was fighting for a cause that would directly affect him and his family. And so it's not far away. For me, right? Where I live, where I've chosen to live, has direct dangers for my children and my wife. Is that appropriate? For me to even live here?
Yeah. Well, I guess it depends on how much agency you have in that choice, or what your purpose for staying there is, right? Mm-hmm. and that's going to come down to very individual circumstances.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Do you have your church is local to you, nearby?
I planted the church.
Okay.
So yes.
So yeah, it's very local. Yeah. Right. So you knowingly went into the environment to
kind of. I mean, I
attend.
was born here. I mean, I was born on the West Side in this environment. I just decided not to leave.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you are probably therefore more equipped, and it's less of a, it would be more difficult to fault you for some kind of a naivete or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, I'm with you. I think Clan of Babylon goes by Elijah in parentheses. I think that the self-sacrifice ideal is admirable, and I'm not yet sure of how to like what to make of it. In sort of my Noahide posture now, but is it something that originates with Christianity? Like, is it unique to Christianity? And if it, whether or not it is, I guess the separate question is it actually a good thing?
Mm-hmm.
Well, or like, I mean, in what context and definition? Like, there's limits to it, right? Like, I think most Christians would say that suicide, for instance, is not a valid form of self-sacrifice, like, or a suicide mission or something, right? There are limits to the sort of the circumstances that warrant or justify, self-sacrifice.
Mm-hmm. Because I think it really depends on like how you define what the highest is, right? So if God is your highest, I mean, even in Deuteronomy, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, and strength, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what does that mean? Like, what is the greatest testimony of love? I mean, sure, there is to live for something, but to die for something is also, I think, I don't know that that's to die for something that you love. I don't know that that's uniquely Christian.
No, I mean, I wouldn't say that it is either, but it's certainly one of the emphases of Christianity. Like, it's high up on the list of things we associate with Christianity.
This is the idea of the Christian view of Judaism, and so I don't know, because obviously Christianity was birthed out of Judaism, right? So Christianity, to a certain degree, is a view of Judaism. Now, whether it's a valid view, I don't. Obviously, that would be the argument. But to a certain degree, the idea is that Jesus is the understanding or the proper understanding of the Jewish tradition. And so, to a certain degree, that's the big question. If self-sacrifice is like the ideal of the within Judaism, to a certain degree, that does validate some of the teachings of Jesus and even the actions of Jesus.
Yeah, and I guess that's like, I mean, that's the can of worms.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the can of worms. I think, because then you need to start asking questions about, like, what does the Bible teach about the Messiah? About what he's going to do, how he's going to do it. There are kind of fun fringe theories out there about how Christianity was invented by the Romans. I guess you could argue that it was, quote unquote, invented by Paul of Tarsus. So like even the whole idea that like it came out of Judaism is I mean maybe like obviously that's like the received wisdom. That's like the common narrative, or but
Well, to a certain degree, I mean, because let's say it was created by Paul. Well, Paul was a Jew. I mean,
well,
uh,
that maybe not though, right? Like that's actually the contentious part of it is like, was he a Pharisee or
well,
not?
was he a Pharisee or was he a Jew? I mean, those would be two separate questions, right?
Well, yeah, it would. He claimed to be a Pharisee, though. I think.
Yeah, he claimed to be a Pharisee, but you would have to contend both aspects, whether or not he was a Pharisee and then whether or not he was a Jew.
True, but like, let's say that I say I'm a Christian, and then I say I'm an Orthodox Christian. So that's like more specific, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you can basically like look at me then and say like, there's no way this guy's an Orthodox Christian, then it kind of casts some shade and doubt on even like. I mean, I guess you'd have to like if Paul says he's a Pharisee, but he doesn't sound or act very Pharisaical, then I'm a little more suspicious about his claim to even being Jewish. Right? It's like,
I mean,
like,
it is logical that to be skeptical, if somebody lies about one thing, they might be lying about another.
Well, there you go. Like, I guess that's the first thing is like, well, he's certainly been proved to be a liar. So
but yeah, it's one of those things where if I say I'm a salsero, like that I'm a great Puerto Rican musician, I can't play any of these instruments. Well, that does not mean that I'm not Puerto Rican, because there's a lot of also if like I'm a Puerto Rican that grew up in like Schaumburg or Grand Rapids, which there are a lot that start to overact their ability to be included in Puerto Rican culture.
Yeah, sure.
It doesn't mean that ethnically they're not Puerto Rican. It just means that they're might be trying to aspire to something that they've never been able to get to.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you're from Grand Rapids, you can be Dutch. that's about as much as you can claim ethnically for Grand Rapids.
Yeah.
Or Polish, I guess. That's often overlooked. There's a lot of Poles here.
A lot of Poles in Chicago too.
Yeah, but
hey, my parents are calling me about my kids, my sick kids.
Okay, well, you better take that call. I could probably hang out for another 5 minutes myself. So if you want to, I'll stay on if you want to drop.
Yeah, so let's drop out. You keep it going. Pleasure talking to you.
Oh, you too. Well, see ya. What is the Christian understanding of how the Romans knew that Paul was a citizen in Acts 22:23? Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that I recall it ever being like a thing that, other than just we took it at face value, that Paul, dropped the citizen card and managed to avoid getting flogged or whatever, chained up. But I mean, I have heard it said that it was suspicious that a Pharisee would be a Roman citizen, and how that would be legit. But I don't really recall the details, so I couldn't speak on it. Paul says it in a stronger case that he was born a Roman, which is more interesting. Where does it say that? Is that? I mean, I don't doubt it. I just don't recall the verse. Let's see, Acts 23. Oh, 22:28. Oh, right. Then the commander said, I had to pay a lot of money for my citizenship, but I was born a citizen, Paul replied. The Tribune answered, I bought this citizenship for a large sum. Paul said, but I'm a citizen by birth. Interesting. All right. Well, unfortunately, Mo left it right around the time that I had to bail. Let me see if I can conjure up the Jews. And by that, I mean Jacob. Now, I don't know if the broadcast ends if I leave, or if it will just be the background. Okay, I'm going to give it 1 minute. Any closing comments I will read, and then I'm going to end the broadcast. Clown of Babylon says, thanks, have a good night. Hopefully the storm doesn't get you too bad. Yes, we have a nice storm coming here in the Midwest and maybe other places. It won't be our first rodeo, but I got a little extra gas in the can just in case I got to fire up the generator. I hope our power doesn't go out. Yeah, be well, everybody. Take care. I'm going to end the broadcast now.